Hello and welcome to Double Lock Design. In this video, we're going to show how two sets of pins can hold a lid together. And this is, again, just another idea for potential puzzle box designs. So there's another video that will complement this that actually shows me designing all these parts in real time. But to go forward with this, you can see that there's four components, and the way that this is going to come together is essentially this first piece here is going to slide down onto the base. Now the way that that would work is once it's put together like this, you can see that they line up to a point where you have an opening on two sides for this portion here, and then you can see there's an opening on both sides for the other piece that's going to line up. So the next piece that's going to go in is this one here. It's going to slide right down into that portion, and once it's aligned, you can essentially see that there is clearances for all the parts so that the other pin can fit in. The last piece that's going to go in is, of course, this magenta pin here, and it'll slide right in like so. And then essentially it'll be aligned to fit in. So the most crucial thing when designing something like this is your limits and fits. You're going to have to make sure that it's loose enough for all the parts to fit together and be able to pull apart, but also tight enough so that they don't just slide out without any effort. So I used actually 30 thou or 15 thou a side for most of my parts, and it seems to be fitting pretty decent as a whole. I'm pretty happy with it. And yeah, so essentially that's how this works and is fitted. Now let's take a look at some of the parts and see how that comes together. So as you can see here, this is the base. I'm going to go over a couple things on this portion and then continue it in the lid. So if we look at this to begin with, I actually just made a box, nothing too crazy. I then did a shelf feature of a 3/4 of an inch. As you can see here, 3/4 of an inch. Next, I did the first groove, which I based off the lid, and I'll get into that when I go there. And then after that, I did the second groove on the outside, and I did that based on the other alignment pin, and we'll go into detail when we go there. And then I just mirrored it just to show a different way of doing the feature. So next we have the lid. The lid, I did a very similar thing. I started off with a box, and then I created the inside groove. So that I did this one differently purely because I already knew what my dimensions were for the base. So I made this 8 1/8 by 5 1/8 to give me 1/16 of an inch gap all the way around the box. I then extruded it so that I had 3/4 of an inch gap, so it was 5 inches deep, and that's how I made the inside groove. Next, I did the top groove. So the way that I did this is I knew I wanted to make the pin itself to be a certain thickness. So when I did this, I stated 0.75/2 plus 15 thou for the outside portion to give me that cut in here. I then took that same dimension and then added a 1/16 to give me the extra gap. And this is what gave me the starting point for my dimension. So you can see here it's a little bit bigger, 0.843, but then that allowed me to make my top alignment pin. After that, I made the groove so that it can sit flush, so it's about 3/8 of an inch plus 15 thou. Next, I made this groove, which I will talk about in the alignment pin, how that was made. I mirrored that feature to the other side, and then lastly, I made another 3/8 of an inch groove for the other pin, so that it all fits nice and flush. So let's go take a look at what it looks like for the alignment pins and go from there. So here you can see the first pin that is made and designed for this piece. So if we go back to the start, you can see I actually just started off with the actual U shape. And the way that I did that is I essentially figured out this dimension from combining the other two dimensions on the box of the lid and the base together to give me 5 7/8. And then again, 5 3/4 is the total height of the box. This dimension here was again figured out due to the grooving I did for the two pieces. And then I wanted this to be 3/8, which is half the thickness of the wall thickness I made. So that was just a choice I made. And essentially that is how I did this portion. Once that was done, the next piece was actually designing the grooves. So these grooves here are for the other portion for alignment pins. I chose an arbitrary number of 2 inches. I then brought it up and I said I wanted it to be 3/4 of an inch tall for this new pin. And then I added 15 thou to give me some clearance. The other thing I did for the width is I took the width of the part itself and I divided it by 2. And that's what essentially gave me this starting portion. The last thing I did is I had to actually put in another piece, and this was just after fitting all the parts together. I gave it an extra 15 thou for the width, and that was just to give me some extra clearance for that pin that I put in the other way. Next you'll see this pin, and this was again all figured out by measuring the dimensions of the box and the other groove together to give me all these dimensions. So these ones are a little bit wonkier, they're not proper, like it's not 5.5, it's 5.454. And this is all put together with just making sure you had all the nice clearances. And then that's what essentially gave me the box to fit so nicely together. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. Otherwise, this is Tyler with 3D Printer Store, and I hope you have a great day.